Many of us hear about the Roman Empire, the battles, the emperors, the marble statues that still stand today, but few truly know how it all began. How a small cluster of farmers and shepherds in central Italy rose to dominate the world and became one of the wealthiest empires in human history. So, what made Rome so powerful? How did they go from dusty villages to golden cities overflowing with treasures, slaves, and silver coins stamped with the faces of gods and emperors? And most importantly, how did they turn conquest into cash? Welcome to the Finance Primer, where we uncover how money, power, and history collide. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed because the secrets of empires, both ancient and modern, always start with how they built their wealth. Now, let's go back 2,700 years to the banks of the Tiber River. Rome's story begins around 753 BCE with the legend of Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a she-wolf who supposedly founded the city of Rome. Whether myth or truth, one thing is clear: Rome was born out of conflict. It was built on survival, ambition, and a hunger for dominance. At first, Rome was just another small city-state among dozens on the Italian peninsula. It wasn't rich, it wasn't mighty, but it was ruthless. From its earliest years, Rome learned that wealth didn't just come from farming, it came from control. Control of land, trade, and people. And every neighboring tribe, every rival kingdom was a potential investment or a future acquisition. By the 6th century BCE, Rome had become a kingdom under the rule of the Etruscan kings. And the Etruscans taught the Romans a valuable financial lesson: wealth must be displayed. They built temples covered in gold, introduced advanced engineering, and started taxing trade routes that passed through Rome. That was Rome's first taste of real money. But when the last Etruscan king, Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown, the Romans vowed never to have another king again. They founded the Roman Republic, a system run by senators and citizens. And in that new system, wealth wasn't inherited from a crown. It was earned through war, trade, and politics. Rome had discovered its economic engine: conquest capitalism. Every war Rome fought had a price tag and a profit margin. When Rome defeated a neighboring city, they didn't just take the land, they took the resources: gold, silver, grain, livestock, and most importantly, people. Those people became slaves, the backbone of Rome's economy for centuries. But there's something most people don't realize. The Roman elite didn't just fight for glory, they fought for returns. Every senator, every general, every ambitious young man in Rome could finance a campaign, and in return, they'd receive spoils of war, new territories, and political power. War wasn't just politics, it was an investment. By 264 BCE, Rome was wealthy enough and ambitious enough to challenge one of the greatest powers in the world: Carthage. The Punic Wars would change everything. Carthage controlled the Western Mediterranean, including lucrative trade routes filled with gold, silver, and exotic goods from Africa and Spain. Rome wanted it, and after over a century of brutal warfare, Rome took it. When Rome finally defeated Carthage in 146 BCE, they didn't just win a war, they acquired an empire's wealth. They seized mines in Spain that produced tons of silver each year. They took North Africa's fertile farmland that would feed millions, and they enslaved over 500,000 people, selling many for profit and using others to build cities, roads, and villas. Rome's economy exploded. For the first time in history, the Mediterranean truly became what they called it: Mare Nostrum, our sea. But here's where it gets fascinating. Rome's expansion wasn't just about greed, it was about financial structure. To fund these massive wars, Rome developed one of the earliest versions of public debt. Wealthy citizens would loan money to the state in exchange for political favors, interest payments, or trade monopolies. Sound familiar? It's a pattern that repeats even today: governments borrowing from the rich to wage wars that end up making the rich richer. The more wars Rome fought, the more money flowed into elite hands. And soon, an entire class of financial oligarchs emerged: the eques, or horsemen, named after the horses they could afford for battle. They weren't senators or kings, they were Rome's businessmen. They ran the mines, the tax systems, the supply chains. They made fortunes financing wars, supplying armies, and collecting taxes from conquered provinces. Rome had essentially invented corporate capitalism before the modern world ever existed. As Rome grew, so did its cities, glittering centers of trade and luxury. Gold coins called ore and ore Silver denarii flowed through markets. Merchants sold silk from China, spices from India, ivory from Africa, and slaves from Gaul. At its peak, Rome had over 60 million people under its rule, almost a quarter of the world's population at the time. And with that came an enormous tax base. But here's where Rome was truly clever. They didn't tax everyone equally. They taxed provinces more heavily, taking resources from the conquered to fund the luxuries of the capital. The wealth of Egypt, the silver of Spain, the grain of North Africa, all flowed into Rome. It was a one-way system, and it made the city the richest in the world. Imagine walking through the Roman Forum at its height. Marble temples gleaming in the sun, senators draped in purple, gold coins clinking in the hands of merchants. Everywhere you looked, power and money intertwined. And behind it all, an empire that understood finance as conquest. But Rome's genius wasn't just military or economic, it was psychological. They mastered the art of control through wealth. Conquered nations were allowed to keep their leaders, as long as those leaders paid tribute. Trade partners were offered protection as long as they accepted Roman coins. Rome didn't need to conquer every kingdom with swords. They could conquer with currency. The Roman denarius became the first global currency, trusted from Britain to Syria. And with that came something even more powerful than gold: faith in Roman stability. When people believe your money is valuable, your empire lasts, at least for a while. But every empire that rises on wealth faces the same question: how long before the money starts to control the people instead of the other way around? Because as Rome grew richer, corruption followed. Senators hoarded gold, generals bought loyalty with bribes, and the gap between rich and poor grew wider every year. The very thing that made Rome powerful, its wealth, began to rot it from within. The once patriotic republic started to fall apart. Soldiers no longer fought for Rome, they fought for whoever paid them more. The Republic's ideals crumbled under the weight of greed, and from that chaos rose a new kind of leader, one who would turn Rome's financial machine into a weapon for total domination. His name was Julius Caesar. Caesar saw that power came not from the Senate or even the army, but from money. He borrowed heavily, formed secret alliances with Rome's richest men, and promised them all the same thing: profits from victory. When Caesar conquered Gaul, he didn't just expand Rome's borders, he seized enormous wealth. The gold mines of Gaul, the sale of hundreds of thousands of slaves, and the new tax revenues made him the wealthiest man in the Republic. But here's the cliffhanger. Caesar's wealth made him unstoppable, and that terrified the old guard. They feared that money had finally bought the Republic, and in 44 BCE, they struck back, assassinating him on the Senate floor. But it was too late. The Republic had already fallen, and in its place, the Roman Empire was born. What came next would reshape the financial world forever. Rome's emperors would not just rule through armies, but through economic mastery. Gold, silver, taxes, trade routes, all were brought under imperial control. The empire would reach unimaginable wealth, but also plant the seeds of its eventual collapse. Because when money becomes power, and power becomes the only currency, every empire eventually faces the same end. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button, because in the next part, we're diving deeper into how Rome's emperors turned global trade, taxation, and pure ambition into the richest financial system the ancient world had ever seen, and how it all came crashing down. When Julius Caesar fell, the Republic died with him, but out of the ashes rose something far greater. An empire built on wealth, order, and absolute control. And leading it all was Caesar Augustus, the man who would perfect Rome's financial system and turn it into the beating heart of a superpower. Augustus understood something few leaders before him had. Wars made money, but peace kept it. He called it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And during that time, from about 27 BCE to 180 CE, Rome reached its golden age. But here's the secret. Peace didn't mean the end of conquest. It meant that conquest had evolved. Rome no longer expanded through swords and spears alone. It expanded through trade, taxes, and economic influence. The empire became the largest marketplace on earth. From the dusty ports of Egypt to the bustling harbors of Britannia, Roman merchants traded gold coins, olive oil, spices, textiles, glass, and wine. Every road, every sea route, every conquered city was part of a grand financial network, all feeding wealth back to Rome. Imagine it. A Roman coin minted in the workshops of Augustus, a golden aureus, could travel thousands of miles and still be accepted as currency. From the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Gaul, people trusted Roman money. That trust was the true empire. Because what made Rome rich wasn't just the gold itself, it was confidence. Confidence that the Roman system worked, that its coins had value, that its armies could protect trade routes and punish anyone who stood in their way. Rome had turned its economy into a brand, a symbol of stability and power that no rival could match. But how did they keep the wealth flowing? By mastering one of the most advanced financial systems in ancient history. Taxes became the empire's lifeblood. Every province paid tribute, not in loyalty, but in coin, grain, metals, and manpower. Egypt alone supplied enough grain each year to feed the entire city of Rome, and Rome made sure the taxes kept coming. They built an entire bureaucracy dedicated to collecting wealth from every corner of their empire. Publicans, or tax collectors, became some of the richest men alive, buying tax rights in advance, then squeezing provinces for profit. In many ways, they were the investment bankers of their time, betting on the empire's ability to extract more from its citizens than it paid out. And as trade flourished, so did innovation. Rome developed advanced systems for bookkeeping, money lending, and property rights. Merchants could get loans to finance long-distance voyages. Ships sailed with insurance agreements to protect against loss. They had, quite literally, invented the foundation of modern finance 2,000 years ago. But wealth always comes with temptation. The emperors who followed Augustus saw the treasury overflow, and many couldn't resist dipping their hands in. Caligula, for instance, reportedly spent his entire fortune on palaces, races, and gold-plated ships. Emperor Nero devalued the currency itself, reducing the silver content of coins to fund his extravagant lifestyle and rebuild Rome after the Great Fire. Each emperor learned the same dangerous lesson. If you can't create more wealth, you can always mint more coins. And at first, no one noticed. But slowly, inflation began to creep in. The silver denarius, once nearly pure, became diluted with copper and lead. The empire was printing money long before printing even existed. And here's where history takes a chilling turn. Because when a government begins to lose control of its money, when the currency loses trust, an empire begins to crack. By the 3rd century CE, Rome was bleeding wealth. The endless wars along its borders drained the treasury. The cost of maintaining its massive army skyrocketed, and the once golden coins that had symbolized power now felt lighter, both in weight and in worth. Merchants began refusing Roman coins, demanding payment in gold or foreign currency. Trade slowed, inflation soared. The empire that once built wealth through stability now faced collapse through corruption. But the Romans were not without innovation. Emperors like Diocletian and Constantine tried to restore stability by reforming the financial system. Diocletian introduced new taxes and even tried to freeze prices and wages, an early attempt at economic control. It failed. Markets ignored him. Then came Constantine, who created a new gold coin, the solidus, to restore confidence in Roman money. And it worked. For a while. The solidus became one of the most stable currencies in history, lasting over 700 years, long after the Western Roman Empire had fallen. It was the ancient world's version of the US dollar, strong, trusted, and global. But while the currency stabilized, the empire itself was splitting apart. The West crumbled under invasions and internal decay, while the East, known as the Byzantine Empire, carried the torch of Roman wealth and power for centuries more. Now, here's the fascinating part. The wealth of Rome didn't just vanish, it transformed. When the empire collapsed, much of its gold and silver ended up in the hands of the church and the aristocracy. Rome's legacy of wealth management, the idea of taxes, currency, and central control, became the blueprint for European monarchies that followed. And even today, many of our financial systems echo Rome's innovations, the idea of state-backed currency, the concept of public debt, the centralization of trade, all began in the Roman Empire. But maybe the most powerful lesson from Rome isn't how it built wealth, it's how it lost it. Rome believed its empire was eternal, that its coins would never lose value, that its power would never fade. And yet, just like every empire before and after, it discovered the ultimate truth of economics. Trust is the real currency of power. When people stopped believing in the empire's money, They stopped believing in the empire itself. The soldiers who once fought for Rome began fighting for whoever could pay more. The provinces that once sent taxes began hoarding their wealth. And as the money dried up, so did loyalty. Wealth didn't just buy Rome's power, it bought its downfall. Imagine this, a Roman merchant in the 2nd century counting freshly minted gold coins under the glow of an oil lamp, and an American banker today looking at digital numbers on a screen, watching markets rise and fall, separated by thousands of years, but connected by the same story. The pursuit of wealth, the belief in value, and the danger of forgetting that even the mightiest financial systems can crumble. The Roman Empire's story isn't just about history, it's about us, about how economies rise on ambition and collapse under excess, and about how the next empire, whatever form it takes, may already be following the same pattern. Because if Rome taught us anything, it's that money isn't power until people believe it is. And once that belief fades, no wall, no army, no emperor can save what's already collapsing. So, as we look at our world today, global currencies fluctuating, debt rising, wealth concentrating in the hands of the few, the echoes of Rome grow louder. They remind us that empires don't fall overnight. They fall coin by coin, debt by debt, until the weight of greed crushes the foundation they were built on. And when that day comes, history won't be repeating. It will simply be rhyming, in gold, in power, and in the timeless pursuit of control. If you've made it this far, you've just traveled through nearly 1,000 years of financial evolution, from humble farmers on the Tiber River to the richest civilization in human history. And if you've enjoyed this journey, make sure you're subscribed to Financial Primer, because this is just the beginning. In the next video, we'll explore how the fall of Rome shaped the banking systems of medieval Europe, and how those same financial principles still run the world today. Because to understand money, you have to understand its history.